Cleaning track is never easy, and there must be loads of different methods. And clearly, this isn't the way to do it. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie. Hopefully you saw the last video, which was all about loco maintenance, and I explained how I tend to clean my locomotive wheels, and also the faces on the insides of the wheels where the pickups run to make sure you get good running. But of course, cleaning the locomotive wheels and pickups and all the rest of it is only half the story, because at the end of the day you need clean track. And that's what this video is all about today. But before we go into that, what I would like to do is have a quick chat and a quick thank you to my patrons. The $5 and above patrons, your link will no longer be monetized when you pick it up the day before. Hopefully the viewing experience will be a little bit more smoother, let's say. And if you'd like to become a patron, then there should be a link in the Show More tab down below, and you'll also find a link at the end of the video. And also I'd like to thank the patrons and the people that donate to the channel to make especially this video possible, because I had to buy in a lot of stuff. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. So let's crack on with track cleaning. So let's kick off with a little bit of science. Now there are 4 elements to cleaning, as I'm sure your wives and partners will tell you. There's abrasion, which is where items rub together and wear away the dirt. There's a chemical aspect, such as using a window cleaner on a glass or on mirrors. There's also time, how long you're going to rub these things for, and heat, because obviously heat does enhance the cleaning process. So if we look at it from a point of view of a washing machine, then in go your clothes, the drum starts to roll around in the water, the clothes rub together and off the sides of the drum. The chemical is your washing detergent, washing powder that goes in, and the hot water enhances the progress, and it runs for, let's say, a 1 hour cycle, and out come clean clothes, and down the sink goes the dirty water. All good stuff. And exactly the same process can be looked at from model railways of cleaning track. I think we'll leave off the heat. We're not going to take a blow lamp to our track. So we're left with abrasion, chemical and time. We'll look at these differently. So if we just stick with abrasion to start with. Now, as guilty as sin I really am on this one, because for years and years I've been using a Peco track rubber. And when you look closely at this, you can see all the little metal fragments glinting in the lights. So what's this made of? Well, it appears to be made of obviously metal fragments, glue and rubber. And when you rub it along the track, what does it do? It scratches your track clean, which if you're using sort of, an outside, large rail, I think it's G scale or whatever, running around your garden, that's probably not such an issue. Whereas if you're using something like this kind of track here, N gauge or, narrow gauge track, then putting grooves in this is not such a good idea. Now, to further emphasize the point, here's a piece of old steel track. You always tell the steel ones because obviously magnets stick to it. So if I run the Peco track rubber over this and take out some of this corrosion and give it a good rub and get it shining, there we are, and it's coming up just fine, nice and shiny. And hopefully you can see that it's a little bit more clean. Beautiful. But what's that leave us underneath? Well, obviously you can see now the stuff that's come off both the rails and off of the rubber. Now if I put a magnet underneath here, hopefully you can see all the stuff is magnetic. And that's the stuff that you're leaving on your track, which isn't the end of the world, but once it gets into your points and everything else, then clearly this is going to give you issues. Hence the vacuuming of track is very, very important if you should use or to continue to use track rubbers. And it doesn't stop here. I have come across some dreadful systems for cleaning track, and I actually saw a member of our club using this. This is like a very vicious emery cloth pad, and off he went scratching his way along a 00 track. Brought the track up nice and clean very quickly, but looking back on what he was doing, it really is a dreadful, dreadful tool. Now, if you've been using track rubbers for years, is there any long-term damage? Well, apparently there is. The more you use it, the more grooves you leave in there, and because the surface area has increased because of the grooves within the track, then obviously it will oxidize quicker, and therefore you'll get more of a a carbon buildup, for example. But how can you get rid of it? Well, you could use something like an emery cloth, and I'm not talking about this. This is P400, which is like a standard emery cloth size. What I'm talking about is this stuff here. This is 2000 grit, wet and dry, and you can moisten this with a chemical I'll come to later. And if you choose to rub this on your track, you can obviously erode some of the grooves that you've been putting in it over time. But whereabouts should you use these? I mean, you know, if you've done all the damage, what are you supposed to do? Well, I mean, any area you can get to that you can kind of smooth off, if it becomes, you know, an issue, then, you know, these things are ideal to try with. And then just use a block and then moisten, as it's a wet and dry, and moisten it and rub it down. But what about all these other products that seem to be around? This is the Dapol car. I owned one of these for about a week. I thought it was dreadful. Dapol aren't going to like this. It had a rotating disc in the bottom, and as it ran along, the disc rotated, and it kind of had an abrasive effect on your track. And I just found it wouldn't go over my points very well, and it was snagging, and I didn't really like the effect that it was having on my track. However, this belongs to a friend of mine, Richard, who has a DCC chip in here, and he's gone for number 887 for some reason, but there we are. And he uses the vacuum cleaner instead of the rotating disc. And what he does is he's knelt at the altar of track rubbers, except what he's done is he's got a lead block, and he pops it in the hole, and then he pops his track rubber on, and then he runs it around his layout. And the direction he runs it around is that way, so he cleans his track with the track rubber and then sucks up the bits with the vacuum cleaner, which sort of makes sense. But you're still using tools that have an aggressive nature to clean your track. So let's give it a go and see if it's any good. I've got this Western Firebrand 1012 on the right hand side, and on the left hand throttle I've got the Dapol vacuum cleaner stroke rubber. So we'll start and now you can hear that's on full power, and then so that's the vacuum cleaner running. So if I go to the Western now and send it off on its way, and we'll leave it to run at that speed for about an hour. Well, an hour has now gone by, so it's time to stop this little beastie and see what progress we've made. Lifting it off the track, there's the track rubber and the weight, And then inside here there is this small compartment, and if we empty it, what do we get out? Well, hopefully you can see there's a fair amount of debris, but to be honest it's just ballast, I imagine, that's come off where I ballasted the viaduct, and a little bit of wire, but nothing of any real consequence. Nothing that could have been done without an ordinary vacuum cleaner. But what about the rails? Well, it is fair to say that this track does feel smoother than the ones that I haven't run the track rubber on. So from a smoothness element, yes, it does feel much cleaner. But of course, that's because the last hour we've had this track rubber scratching it. So what have we achieved really? Well, to be perfectly honest, not a lot. What this has done really, you could do in 5 minutes with a vacuum cleaner, and if you were to use an ordinary track rubber, you could whistle through this in next to no time. Of course, this train can go to hidden areas such as a helix or in a fiddle yard where it might not be that easy for you to get to, let's say. So I don't think this is a wise investment. Though to be perfectly honest, in the past where I've used track rubbers extensively on my layout, I have done some dreadful things, you might say. In particular, I used an airbrush when I sorted the points out coming off the viaduct, and then a couple of days later, once the paint had dried, I attacked it with a Pico track rubber and removed all the paint, and it all seemed well. But how much damage is done during this process is really quite difficult to quantify. But if you're happy with that, then kind of so be it. You know, we are where we are. But these abrasive items, such as these awful blocks, wet and dry, and track rubbers aren't necessarily the right way to do. But what you first need to do is, of course, you do still need to get your track clean. So how do we go about that? Well, now I'd like to talk about just cleaning the track and nothing else. No, not putting on any residues or anything, so just straight track cleaning. And some people recommend vinegar. Well, I must confess I don't, purely because I don't like my model railway smelling like a fish and chip shop. We are where we are. However, there's a great deal of controversy regarding this stuff here, which is, as you've probably gathered, isopropyl alcohol. As you can tell from the label, this is 99.9% pure isopropyl alcohol. The 0.1%, I believe, is an additive to stop you drinking this stuff or mixing your own spirits. What could possibly go wrong? Now, as it's 99.9%, then it evaporates quite quickly. If, of course, it were the 70% isopropyl alcohol, then surely 30% of it must be made up of something else. And if you buy that, yes, it is. It's made of water. And water doesn't evaporate that quickly. And if you want to pour 30% water all over your track and your ballast and everything else, well, I don't actually think that's such a good idea. You know, it may well linger. It can lift ballast as water can. So I think it's something that surely should be avoided. So what I have now is some isopropyl alcohol, and if I'm going to spray it on this little piece of rag and run it along the track of which the Dapol car has just run on to see what residue has been left behind. And as you can see, there's a little bit on the cloth, and you can see obviously where it's removing the carbon and the oxidization off the rails. But let's do the same on the other main line where the Dapol car hasn't been running. And hopefully you can see that there is in fact very, very little difference. There is slightly more carbon on the track that hasn't been cleaned by the Dapol car than on the other. So at the end of the day, it kind of reinforces my opinion that those cars aren't really a shrewd investment. So you can clean all your track with isopropyl alcohol, it will take off all the residue, and because it evaporates quite quickly, being 99.9%, it's good to go. And it seems to be paint and plastic safe, so there are no major issues. But of course, what does that leave you on the track? Well, it leaves you with nothing. It leaves you with the bare metal. So there are other products around now that offer future protection. So let's take a look at those now. I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel. I notice that actually only about 25% of my viewers do. And also, if you click the little bell icon, then you'll get a notification when the next video is released. Now clearly I can't go through every single product on the market, but I think this one's worth a mention. It doesn't leave a residue as such, but it's a solid graphite block. And if your tracks are already clean, then all you're doing is rubbing graphite onto the surface of the rails, which is leaving a conductive layer. Graphite clearly conducts electricity, and if you rub your fingers again, you find you get graphite on your hands. Some people like this. I'm completely indifferent about it. I believe I found a better way, but a graphite block, and these things are something like £5 on eBay or whatever, and if I can find one, I'll leave a link in the Show More tab below. But it's a simple method of enhancing the conductivity. Be careful when you use it over points. If it's going to start to break up or whatever, and you're going to get fragments, then obviously you don't want it shorting out across the frogs or whatever. But yeah, a graphite block, always worth considering, and it's a simple answer to looking after your track if you don't want to get into more complex liquids. So if we talk about more complex liquids, let's first start with something called Track Magic from Deluxe Materials. My hands are covered in graphite now. So Track Magic comes in a little bit of a posh box, really, kind of over-engineered for what it is. And you get a little bottle of Track Magic, a pipette, a small little container, and a couple of applicators. And all you're doing with this stuff here is obviously you're pouring it into the container and dabbing your applicator in, and then rub it on your tracks. I can't deny it, it's a bit of an arduous task, and I've used this stuff and it didn't really do a great deal, to be perfectly honest. You just, use it once because you buy it at a show. What a good idea that'll be. Yeah, buy some of that, take it home, use it once, put it in the cupboard, never see it again. But there is a little bit more of a comment to make, really, and that was Matt Slade used it, and he did a review on his channel, and because his attic is in the attic, because his model railway is in the attic, one time he used it, and then there was a drop in temperature, and it seemed to turn into more of a waxy residue on top of the rails, and his locomotive lost all traction, which yeah, rather unforgiving, really. So Matt Slade, I'll try to leave a link in this Show More tab below, because it's worth looking at that video before you buy this stuff, especially if you've got an attic layout. Yeah, I can't recommend it, if you're going to subject your layout to cold weather, as it were. So Track Magic, price, I think it's just under £10 for, bear with me, Track Magic, £9.95 for 50 fluid ounces. And it does leave a protective layer on your track, so if you're into that kind of stuff, fill your boots. It's not something I personally would recommend. If you've bought it and you've got on it tremendously well, then again, please leave a comment for others to read. But that's my second substance that's worth a look at. The next thing is the new kid on the block, and this one is very interesting, and it's called Inox. coming in 3 different containers. Inox is a small needle type arrangement, and this one is food safe. So if you want to put it in your sandwiches, sorry, it's food safe, so you can use it on, you know, I suppose food mixes and the like. Whereas these are not food safe. There's an aerosol and a small pump. And if you read the literature, it says that it is non-conductive, which is rather odd really, because if I take this spray container and pop a drop on the top of here, and then with this meter, serious stuff, the glasses are coming out, I sure you can see this. I pop the meter there and pop these 2 probes in that liquid, and when I put the probes together, you'll see that I get a circuit, and there is next to no resistance. So whilst they might say it's non-conductive, well, clearly it either goes on there thin enough that it works perfectly. So much so that people are using it on their pickups to enhance their running. Quite a strange thing to do, really, you would have thought. But this stuff really is a game changer for model railways. Now, if you see a rather flamboyant Australian by the name of Greg from Fishplate Films, he likes to rant. He's a highly amusing channel, and again I will leave a link below. He did a review of this, and he has an electrician's background, and he's involved with the Australian Railways, and this is where I picked this up from, and it is an absolute marvel. So what do you do with it on your track? Well, you just, as usual, you would just simply squirt it onto a rag and then rub it on the rails. It removes the carbon and oxidation film from your rails, and then leaves a protective layer. Now, the protective layer, you could say, might attract dirt. Well, if it does, it's a very, very minor amount compared to the asset of having it on there in the first place. So this stuff is really, really good. The only drawback I can see is how do you get it into your buried sections of your railway, such as a helix or hidden fiddle yards, which are underneath boards and that kind of thing. And then I would naturally use the old favourite of the CMX applicator. And if you haven't seen one of these before, hopefully I should leave a link below. But what you do is you top up the tank. This is a very heavy, almost solid brass item, by the way. Is you top up some of the tank with this type of fluid. You open up this little valve, and it has a drip feed mechanism then onto the pad, and this will then take the fluid into those hidden sections, such as in fiddle yards and the rest of it. So let's put some of this on the track and see what this looks like. So once more, we're back into wiping the track, and if I spray some of it on there, be careful, it comes out rather quickly. And this is the track again that the Dapol rail cleaner didn't run on, and you can see it's pulling off the dirt. And if I do it on the old track where the Dapol car did run, which would be this track here, again, nice and dirty, as you'd expect. So if I get a fresh piece now, how much is left on there? Well, actually, not a great deal. The Inox removes the muck quite well. So what do you need to do for this to get the most out of this product? Well, first thing you need to do is obviously to clean the whole of your track. Now, I come from an engineering background. Years and years ago, I used to work on helicopters. Someone once said he wouldn't fly in an aircraft that I'd walked past. What a compliment. But helicopters tend to be serviced on a flying hours basis or on a calendar basis. And I like calendar basis sort of servicing really. I tend to top up my windscreen washers on the 1st of the month. I charge my Makita drill batteries on the 1st of the month. I check my car tyres, windscreen washers, all this kind of stuff I do on the 1st of the month. And this strikes me as a 1st of the month kind of job, is just to run the inox right across your layout and be done with it. And then it's the only way of telling that the product is serving you well, rather than using it when you get problems. I mean, that's what we tend to do. We fight fires, don't we? Yeah, we'll go play trains until it all goes to rats. And then, oh yeah, I haven't cleaned my track for months or whatever. But if you do things on a periodic basis, then you get much better running. And this strikes me as one of those sort of jobs, is you come up here, to your railway room once a month and just, have an hour or so of running, a cloth around your track using this sort of product. And if you've got one of those posh tankers, you can send that around and just leave it and just, go from track to track and do it that way. Putting it on the track will, of course, pull it onto the wheels of your rolling stock, and it will actually start to pull the carbon and the dirt off of those off of those wheels themselves. So keeping the track clean when you're kind of new on the game might be a good idea, because if you're actually decanting, as it were, the dirt from your rolling stock onto the rails, then clearly you need to keep it running and keep it good. So it does strike me as an ideal commodity. And then once your layout's up and running and all your wheels are clean, your track's clean, this is going to provide some excellent running characteristics for your layout. It really is the dog's doodah. Where'd you get it from? Well, it won't be a surprise to you that I got it from James Hudson down at DCC Train Automation, and he stocks all three, and I'll go to the prices a little bit later, but these are surprisingly cheap. Anyway, I'll put my little CMX truck on and we'll see that run around. So there we have it, inox, and it definitely improves the conductivity between the railhead and the wheels and through to the pickups. It is absolutely brilliant. A word of warning: if you use traction tyres, sadly this is not the product for you, because it will make the rubber on the traction tyres swell up. So unless you want to move that stock on, then this isn't the product for you. Prices, as I mentioned earlier, the needle bottle, which is FG, which is food grade, not for sandwiches, 60 millilitres, £7.50. The pump spray is £7 for 125 millilitres, and the odd one is, the aerosol is £7.95 for 100 grams. But I reckon it's about 150 millilitres in there. If you're going to buy this, what would I buy? I would buy that one and either one of these two, whichever best suits you, whether you want the pump spray or the aerosol. The pump spray is more useful in some ways because you can unscrew it and you can decant it out, whereas obviously if you just want to use that as a fluid in a bottle, then you have to kind of spray it out. But it's the same basic product. They are exceptionally good. So there we go. Now, before you click off, I'd just like to talk about the future of the channel. And the reason is, during the lockdown, I was making one video every week, and since the end of the lockdown, I've gone back to once a fortnight. That's once every 2 weeks if you're American. Gone back to once a fortnight, and some people have come on and said, yeah, Charlie, come on, let's go back to once a week or whatever. But it's hard for me to put aside the time because I'm normally earning through something else. If you'd like to become a patron, and if you can cough out enough money to buy yourself a coffee once a month and become a patron instead, then I will bring these videos out once a week. I'll do my utmost to do that. They won't always be, straight down the line to suit everybody. Sometimes there might be a Digitrax one. Sometimes there might be something to do with DCC, certain aspects of landscaping and all these guys. So we try to vary it out, perhaps a bit of scratch buildings, a bit of electronics. Anyway, if you're into that, then please support the channel with a donation, or preferably become a patron. That would be absolutely ideal. It's surprising how many people watch my videos yet don't give it a thumbs up. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Thank you very much to all my patrons. There's the link if you want to be one. There's the subscribe button if you're so embarrassed that you haven't subscribed as yet, and there should be a video here and here. and I'll see you next week. Take care. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.